We're seeing platform companies built around AI models and around lab automation and technical capabilities, and they all have this idea that like somehow AI makes things next level. That's going to unlock capabilities that didn't exist before, and that's what I fell in love with at Ginkgo. And I think it's a great story. What I found was that platform biotech is actually like it's a product problem. It's a product problem more than it's a technology problem. My dream for synthetic biology is a dream of rapid iteration. I want rapid prototyping.
Hey, Jake. Thanks so much for joining me today. The purpose of this podcast is to make the complexity of biotech a bit more legible to smart folks outside the biotech bubbles. I thought you would be a wonderful guest to have on because you've spent a good chunk of your career trying to explain the complexities of biotech to normal folks. Before we jump into what you're most excited about and what you're working on, I thought it would be great to start off with learning a bit more about your journey, some of the seminal moments you've had in your career so far, and let's just start there.
Sounds good. That sounds good. So I guess so. My background is I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in systems biology from Harvard Medical School. I was an academic for many years. I led a research group in Paris, France. My interests were science education, making genetic tools to make biology more accessible, bringing people into the drug discovery process, particularly for antibiotic discovery for neglected diseases like tuberculosis, by making drug discovery cheaper. And I've always had an interest in getting people more involved in biotech and in the biology discovery process. When I left academia, I went to work at Ginkgo Bioworks for 3 years, where I worked as a kind of a science communication role. It was called developer evangelist. And there the need was to communicate the capabilities of the Ginkgo Foundry to a really wide audience. So Ginkgo was a place where they had a huge amount of technical talent and a huge amount of technical infrastructure dedicated to engineering biology. Something like $500 million worth of robotics on this platform to make biology easier to engineer. And the challenge was taking that capability and communicating it to someone in agriculture, in industrial biotechnology, in biopharma. Maybe they work in the food industry, or they want to produce some kind of a fine chemical. They don't necessarily have a deep background in biotechnology, but biology can do something for them. It can make a microbe that performs a chemical reaction, or is a diagnostic, or produces a protein, a food protein, or a flavor ingredient. And so there's a need there to sort of solve this problem of biology can do anything. And so, at least in principle, engineered biology can do almost anything.
Yeah.
But everyone has a very specific, often a very highly technical need in their industry for what the problem is in their mind that biology needs to solve. And they can't all get PhDs in order to know what that is. And we also can't necessarily spend months and months at a time having these sort of long, personal, face-to-face communication sessions in order to arrive at an R&D project. You need sort of tight, industry-specific, easy-to-grasp explanations for how biology can solve people's problems.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely explore synthetic biology, but I was also curious to know about your jump from academia to industry. Was that something you always wanted to do? Because I've always been interested in the dynamics of biotech industry versus academia. I've heard, interesting things to say the least about the academic world. What was your thought process in making the jump?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an academic in my heart.
I think most people in biotech are.
Yeah. I mean, I like to play. I like to do creative and fun and weird things with biology. I'm not a particularly materialist by nature, although I do like money. I like money a little bit, probably less than the average sort of professional. But what I like is getting things done. And what I like is having the resources to do science and to make things happen in the world. And so the allure of industry right now is that there's just so much we can do, and so many more possibilities to unlock the resources to actually make biology happen. And so if you're like 10 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. Like if you were motivated by creativity, by exploration, by novelty, looking to solve new kinds of problems, to create new kinds of things, if you were motivated by intellectual curiosity and the sort of process of invention, 10 years ago, academia was your home. Biotech, 10 years ago was mostly grinding on pretty well established workflows in the drug discovery process, right? And there was good money in industry, and you could be impactful, like you could develop medicines for patients. But most people working in biopharma 10 years ago, from my perspective, they were not having tons of fun. And that's changing. That's changing. I think it's changing because we're widening up the scope of what we can do with biology, the kinds of problems that we can solve. It's possible to move faster. It's possible to have a smaller team. It's possible to create some weird new piece of biotechnology and actually get it out to people in a way that they can use. And so that kind of like, if you like to build things, if you like to ship things, I think industry is your natural home today in biotech.
So academia has kind of failed in that sense.
So I have a thesis. So failed is a strong word. Failed is a strong word. I would say yes. Failed.
It's a strong word, but yes.
It's a strong word, but yes. It's a strong word that we should use. And I think people love beating up on academia, and maybe it deserves it. But I think that in biotech particularly, the gap that I recognize is a gap around product-focused thinking. And I think that it's a particular blind spot that we've had in academia, and it emerges naturally from the fact that for almost all of the history of academia, almost all of the resources was in the biopharma sector. Mm-hmm. And biopharma is a really weird industry from the perspective of product, because there's a huge gap. There's an enormous gap between early stage discovery in biopharma and the actual end user. Like it's 15 years, it's $2 billion between the scientist in the lab who has the insight and makes the breakthrough and is like, oh, maybe this could be a medicine. And then this enormous Rube Goldberg machine of translational biotechnology, a million years away from the actual customer and the actual product. And so the result of that is that very, very few academics have any notion that product is an idea that exists. Or that it's something that they need to think about at all, right? It's I'm gonna get my discovery. I'm gonna publish it in Cell. I'm gonna hand it off to my university tech transfer office. It's gonna go into some black box that I have no idea how it works, nor do I care. And then maybe 15 years from now, some biopharmaceutical company is gonna take that and actually put it in front of a customer and use it to make money. And that's like 95% of people who get trained. Like they live inside that culture. The customer effectively doesn't exist. And so that's why we have this blind spot. And so the idea that no, actually, like, this might be a food ingredient, right? Like this might be a flavor ingredient. This might be a cosmetic. This might be something that maybe it's a diagnostic. Like you can show this to somebody in 6 weeks from now and see if they like it. And maybe you should build that. That kind of thinking is it just doesn't exist at all in academic biology.
That makes sense. And it's kind of in line with what I've realized about biotech academia as well. And I feel like the model you're describing worked in the past because there was kind of the steady rate of drug development that was happening and commercialization that was funding a lot of academia. But, new drugs coming to market have fallen off. And so I think it's kind of like a what are we really doing here situation, perhaps. But that's a great segue into synthetic biology writ large, because what you're describing is a world where you can read, write, grow, iterate very quickly using genetic code and create whatever it is you like. To kind of set the big picture here, what is the really science fiction 100-year goal of synthetic biology, and where are we today?
My dream for synthetic biology is a dream of rapid iteration. I want rapid prototyping. This is my focus. I think the analogy, the compelling analogy that keeps bringing people back to synthetic biology, despite how hard it is, despite how challenging it is, is the idea of programming biology, the idea that biology could be like computers in the sense that it's predictable, in the sense that it's controllable, that you can do forward engineering, you can have some idea in your mind about how you want a biological system to behave, write that into genetic code, and then have it work more or less the first time, like in programming. That's the dream. I think for a lot of people, the result of the fruits of that dream are the ability to grapple with complexity and to have some kind, like it's things like a virtual cell or a genetic twin, the idea that you might have some holistic sense of how a human body works, and therefore you can program a therapeutic to have 75 different targets, each one at exactly the right level, to modify 10,000 different parameters across the system, with the effect being that you have some overall effect on wellness. So you're being able to grapple with complexity at that level. I like to think about it more in terms of speed, in the question of speed. Like read and write we can do those pretty quickly now with DNA sequencing. That's often an overnight thing. If you're talking about a plasmid, I can get a plasmid sequence for you tomorrow. Gene synthesis, that's like a 2 to 6 weeks kind of a thing, but it's getting faster, and it's a lot faster than it used to be. And so like my dream for synthetic biology is a dream of rapid prototyping. I want to be able to have an idea for what a microbe does, and I want a minimum viable product in 2 or 3 months, like software timescale minimum viable product. And if it's not perfect, right, if I didn't have total control over the biological system, if I didn't get the sort of optimal outcome, that's okay. I want to get a microbe in front of people so that I can see if it really solves a problem, so that I can do a 3-month product development cycle. That's my radical, impossible dream for biology.
It's interesting to me that you speak in very non-deterministic terms, as in there's no like here. It's not like we're going to Mars. Like the SpaceX goal, like we want to go to Mars. That is the end goal. What you're describing is I want a better process. And I think that kind of speaks to the non-deterministic nature of biology itself, where we're kind of focused on improving processes, making it more iterative, because we actually don't know what's going to come out the other end. And we think it'll be something fabulous. That's what the history of biotech has been. Like people experimenting in labs and kind of coming up with all sorts of new things, repurposing drugs to find new targets, all of these crazy things that you can't really determine beforehand.
Yeah.
But a gun to your head, like if you had to say, here is the going to Mars equivalent of biotech, what do you think it is? Is it curing cancer? Is it solving aging? Is it growing new forms of organic life? Is it growing new trees? What is it like if you had to like run your imagination wild?
What I think winning looks like is a software-like ecosystem for biotech. So I want a startup that raises $50K and it's 2 people out of college, and they're like, this is a problem that we can solve.
What is the problem?
So the dream is an ecosystem like software, where it's not necessarily about being able to solve one gigantic problem. It's about having 10,000 swings at bat and being able to solve local problems in local places for smaller markets. It's going to be, right, it's okay, maybe I'm going to go to the cassava fields in sub-Saharan Africa and I'm going to make a microbe that improves the soil fertility. Or maybe I'm going to go to a particular class of patients that are, they're allergic to normal moisturizers, and I'm going to create some small molecule, some skin cosmetic for that particular demographic. Or maybe I'm going to make a foot deodorant using biology. Or maybe I'm going to make a biosensor for pork, because there's a certain, there are people who want to be sure that there's not pork in their food. Or maybe I'm going to make a biosensor for garlic, because there's people who want to make sure that there's not garlic in their food. And so like all of those things, like if you need to raise $2 billion to bring a drug to market, like all of those things are off the table. You don't even get to try to make those products. So there's this sort of like long tail of bioproducts. And then some of those weird swings are going to be blockbusters in a way that nobody ever could predict right now, right? So somebody out there was like, I want like what's going on in Gila monster spit, and they come away with GLP-1s, right? And you never would have predicted in the early days that it was going to get so popular. And so just like giving people the opportunities to play around with these weird little apps, some of them turn out to be breakthroughs, right? Like somebody, like it's like a Labubu seemed like a really stupid idea. And if you needed to raise $1 billion to bring a Labubu to market, we never would have seen it. But that was a good product. People wanted that.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. So is imagination the only constraint right now? I think it's not. There's like 1,000 different things. There's probably like some regulatory issues around genetically modifying plants and all these things. What is the biggest constraint right now in getting to this iterative software-like future for biotech?
So like there's a kind of bootstrapping, I think, that needs to happen around product, in the sense that we just don't have a muscle for product development or product risk in the biotech ecosystem. So like if you had an idea for a foot deodorant, like a microbial foot deodorant, there really isn't a like, you know, that it's probably not going to be a VC scale exit. It has a certain amount of product risk. Nobody really knows how to evaluate that product risk. It has a certain amount of technical risk. Nobody really knows how to evaluate that technical risk. And there's just not a huge track record of big investor wins from these like product plays in biotech. And so nobody's good at it. And so this is the bootstrapping that needs to happen. We need to just get some wins on the board, and then people can realize, oh, okay, maybe it is worthwhile. I want to be a product biotech investor. Maybe that's something that I should specialize in and get good at.
Yeah. There's a lot of money, or at least there was a lot of money being poured into the biomanufacturing space in the past 5 years or so. And I think in the coming years is gonna be in vogue again as China starts to spend a lot more money on biomanufacturing and creating, I don't know, sustainable steel, low carbon cement, whatever it is. How have you thought about that world, and what did you learn from being kind of in the middle of it all in the past 10 years?
Yeah, I think so. Biomanufacturing, it's kind of like a gateway drug to product for the synthetic biology ecosystem, in the sense that it's more technical, and it's easier to formalize, and it feels more like a science than an art, in the sense that when you do biomanufacturing, you can run a techno-economic analysis. You can measure very specifically the yield of a particular fermenter to know what your product cost is going to be. You can characterize the biophysical properties of the thing that you're making, and being like, okay, does it have the right acid tolerance? Does it have the performance metrics that I need to hit in order to be a drop-in replacement for, in pharmaceutical manufacturing or whatever it is? So it's this more sort of professionalized, this more technical field. And so I think it's a place where scientists are more comfortable saying, right, it's like, okay, I'm gonna make a drop-in replacement for a particular fossil fuel derived product. And as long as I can hit the financial targets, then I know I'm going to win in the market. And so it's like a one-dimensional market, right? In the sense that biomanufacturing is all about cost.
Right. You're kind of just trying to build the exact same thing, but cheaper and better, and with better margins. It's not overly creative.
It's not. Yeah, that's right. It's not. So you don't have to brand it. Right? You don't have to build a product. You don't have to talk to customers that much. You don't have to worry about the user experience and all of those things. These are things that like tend to make scientists uncomfortable, and so there's a kind of a culture gap around that. And so I guess to me like biomanufacturing is like product 1.0, right? It's a one particular kind of customer who has one particular thing that they want.
Yeah. It reminds me of something this other famous investor named Chris Sacca said on a podcast recently, where he has a fund called Lower Carbon, and their whole thing is to unfuck the planet by investing in these green technologies like nuclear fusion and some biomanufacturing. And the one line he said, he was like, "This lower carbon is the least creative thing I've ever done because it's such an obvious market. Like you said, you don't have to iterate with the customer. You know exactly where the money's coming from. You know what the margins are. It's a very well developed Excel spreadsheet field." So kind of stepping back a bit more, I realized in biotech there's these wild fluctuations between platform companies and product companies. And during certain, I don't know, low interest rate periods, you have a huge focus on platform companies that become super buzzy and capture a lot of imagination. And then, I don't know, interest rates rise and people are like, wait, where are the products? Let's focus on the companies actually building the drugs that are, big cash cows, which is why you see companies like Eli Lilly, soaring through the roof right now, and Novo Nordisk with the GLP-1 drugs.
Yeah.
But you were at Ginkgo when platforms were in vogue, when Ginkgo captured the imagination in a way that very few biotech companies have since. What was that process like for you, being in the midst of having so much potential and working through trying to realize that potential?
Yeah. I fell in love with Ginkgo as a scientist, and I fell in love with the technical story. And this is, I think, something that a lot of platform companies have in common. It's this idea that we are going to have the best automation, we're going to have the world's experts, we're going to build the best AI models, get the best data sets, and bring them together and to create a kind of a super advanced machine for solving the hardest problems in biology. And I think it's a beautiful story. Like, we're certainly seeing a lot of that right now around AI. We're seeing platform companies built around AI models and around lab automation and technical capabilities, and they all have this idea that like somehow AI makes things next level. That's going to unlock capabilities that didn't exist before, and that's what I fell in love with at Ginkgo. And I think it's a great story. What I found was that platform biotech is actually like it's a product problem. It's a product problem more than it's a technology problem, in the sense that like the technical capabilities are great, but the hardest thing in the world as a platform company is adapting those technical capabilities to the specific needs of each of your individual platform company, right? Like each of those is its own high tech, like very advanced sort of N of one, like adapter problem to build, right? And so like building the platform is in a sense sort of one problem, and you have to build a bridge 100 different times to 100 different customers, and so that's 100 different product problems.
Yeah, that's why the AWS analogy never sat right with me, because it's so much more standardized with data storage. You kind of dump everything into an S3 bucket, and people kind of play with standardized APIs. It's not the same with biotech. Everything just seems much more. There's a necessity to customize and fit everything for the one niche. I'm guessing that's what you saw. That's kind of what you're describing?
This is the challenge. This is the challenge. It's so the customers in biotech are very demanding. Like they're all scientists. They're all experts in their field. They want things done exactly their way. They don't think that you're smarter than them. They don't think that your AI scientists are smarter than they are, and so they don't defer to you when you say, oh no, we can solve this problem better than you can, right? They're not going to hear that at all. They don't hear it at all. And so like you have to earn their trust. You have to empower them. Right, you have to like make them feel like they're in charge, make them feel like they're calling the shots, like they're getting the sort of the use out of your platform that they want, and it's a very hard tension to resolve, and you have to do it all, and it can't take 8 months of face-to-face deal negotiations from for very highly paid professionals in order to arrive, because now you're not really a platform company at all.
Yeah. I haven't met Jason, but from everything I've listened to him, he would say we are trying to build this with lab automation to where you should be able to just play with an API and code up whatever you want and have the machines run overnight and give you the test results in the morning. Is that something you're optimistic about? Because it seems inevitable. It just seems also really, really hard.
Yeah. I'm optimistic about it. I'm optimistic in particular use cases. I think protein engineering is like a particularly platformable use case. I think that like binder engineering is a particularly platformable use case in the sense that so like the AI tech is really good. It works for many, many different targets. The assay is relatively standardized. You can measure binding affinity for very different targets in a more or less the same way. And so like that's probably the first space where it happens, if it happens, is like, so what that looks like is a world where nobody's engineering their own binder. Just like nobody synthesizes their own oligos. Nobody synthesizes their own DNA oligos, their own primers. That's a 100% of the market belongs to the platform. Nobody wants to do that in-house at all.
Like Twist Bio, that's kind of what they do, right?
Twist, yes, more known for whole gene synthesis, but more companies like GeneWiz or IDT that specialize in shorter oligos for primers. And this was already true 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That nobody wanted to synthesize their own primers. And so like I'm pretty optimistic that protein binder interactions are gonna go that way. That it will make no sense for me to, fire up my protein structure software and run my own instance of RF diffusion to engineer my binder to a particular target. I'm just gonna get that low cost done by a platform company.
Makes sense. But you also earlier kind of lumped these new virtual cell model companies in the bucket of platform companies. And you also described platform companies as having a product problem. So do these virtual cell companies, are they just fucked? Like what? There's so many of them.
Yeah.
Are they even important?
I think so. Are they fucked? I don't know if they're. I don't know. I try to err on the side of optimism. I think there's too much pessimism in biotech.
Yeah.
I think that the dour view of, biology is just too complicated. There are too many steps in the process. And so therefore ever solving one step never gets you that far. I would rather be on the optimistic side. But I'll say that the ones that are going to win they're not going to win because their AI model has the best architecture. That's going to be a commodity thing. They're going to win because they have the best product, that they've found a way to translate a particular new AI capability for 100 different customers in a really efficient way that works for each of their different use cases.
By product, you don't necessarily mean that they discovered a new drug that works, but more like they can offer insights and differentiated data that everyone else really wants. Is that kind of what you're really alluding to?
I mean, so like, what does a customer want?
Yeah, well, who is the customer of a virtual cell company? I'm imagining it's ultimately big pharma that wants rapid iteration and better preclinical trials. That's kind of who the customer is in my mind, or am I mistaken there?
So I guess, I mean, just to like concretize, right? So one version of a virtual cell company is a company that predicts phenotype responses to drugs, right? Like that's something that you could plausibly do with AI. People are doing it already to a certain amount of success, and the models will get better, right? So I'll say, okay, here I have a cellular model for a particular disease. That cell gives a particular phenotype. I want to screen for small molecules that correct that phenotype, that make that phenotype look more like a healthy cell phenotype, and those are my early stage drug candidates, right? And so like that's something you could do with AI. Yeah, you could try to tackle that problem. It's something obviously biopharmaceutical companies want. This sort of like bear case on a capability like that is, well, that's actually stage one. That's like step one out of a 100-step product process.
Yeah.
right? And it's like, okay, well, you did a good job predicting it in cells,
Yeah.
but what about in an animal model? What about in AdMet? What about tox? Is it actually going to be manufacturable? And like and on and on and on, right? So you have to kind of solve all to have this sort of like the holy grail of like one shot small molecule design. Oh, my AI model was so good that it just spit out the cure for cancer in one step and we're done, right? Like that.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to get there.
Absolutely. I think this is a good segue into kind of a dumb question that I have had and I don't have a good answer to, which is, isn't ultimately the constraint not drug discovery, but drug development, and specifically just human clinical trials? We cannot try enough of these drugs at enough clip on different kinds of humans in a reliable manner. So I'm thinking, like, how do we get better human clinical trials? And the answer seems to be some sort of like organoids. Like I feel like that is maybe part of the answer. Like you create a vertically integrated organoids company around, things that are kind of difficult to replicate in animal studies, like
Yeah.
neurological organoids, and I think it's neurological and pancreatic. Why hasn't that happened yet?
Mm.
Like, why haven't we tackled that like really important bottleneck of human clinical trials?
I mean, so like the like sad story that people tell, sometimes they frame it as like the coin flip problem, which is like you could develop a really good organoid model, and maybe it is so good that screening against your organoid model raises the success chance of a drug discovery program from 1% to 5%. Right? And that would be an incredible breakthrough.
Yeah.
Right? That would be an incredible breakthrough. But if a drug discovery program costs $1 billion, you can't do 300 of them. You can't do 50 of them, right? You would, in order to statistically to prove the difference between a program with a 1% success rate and a program with a 5% success rate, you need to iterate on that. You need to do that a lot of times. And so therefore, I believe that these already exist today. I believe that there exists today AI models, organoid models, genetic technologies for drug screening that do substantially increase the risk odds of clinical translation. I think that they already exist. The problem is nobody can prove it. Because it costs $1 billion for every time you try to get a proof point. And so this is the unlock for something like organoids. The question is, how do I show to the customer that I've really solved their problem, short of having 10 drugs in the clinic, which is what would be the robust statistical signal.
Yeah. It sounds like a pretty hefty coordination problem, logistical problem, everything just rolled into one. What have been some of the lessons you learned in trying to communicate the promises of synthetic biology to the average enthusiast in your years at Ginkgo and afterwards? Because the videos you made were very helpful. I loved watching them. But I feel like you probably learned a thing or two about communicating these difficult concepts.
Yeah, I think so. Like the example that I have in my mind is we were working with a particular company. They were in the food space. They were working in food, and they were really, really experts in their domain. Right, like they knew everything about creating this particular food product, how to make it taste good, how to package it so that people would want it, like the nuances of the flavor profile that they were trying to reach. Right, so they were subject matter experts in their particular world, and in our particular world, we can do enzyme engineering, and enzymes have the capability of modifying those flavor profiles. They can degrade or change certain different molecules that are in this flavor profile to move them up and down. And so like you need to to have a good product now, you need to bring those two things together, right? You need somebody like a Ginkgo that can make enzymes that move molecule levels up and down. And then you need a food expert who can be like, this, and this, those are the molecules that I don't want in my product in order to make it be good. Because I don't know, right? I don't know. None of my technical background makes me understand how to make food taste good. And so these particular these particular founders had totally self-educated over the period of a couple of years, starting from like, okay, what's DNA, right? How do you like what are the molecules in food? Where do they come from? They come from metabolic pathways. Metabolic pathways are made from enzymes. How do enzymes work? Oh, look at that. Apparently it's possible to modify enzymes. How do you modify enzymes? Oh, you can do it with something called synthetic biology. Is it possible, like, can we hire someone, right? And so like they had learned these like sort of PhD level concepts in order to like dig into their particular technical problem and to realize that there was somebody in the ecosystem who could solve that problem for them. So like the amount of friction on that is insane. That's insane, right? This was like a years long journey of their particular persistence in order to become effectively PhD level scientists in order to realize that there was somebody there who could make enzymes for them as a service. And that's totally unacceptable, right? Like nobody's ever going to do that again, right? Like that the level of effort that requires on the part of a customer is like biotech will completely fail if we ever ask that from any customer. And so like that is the kind of user profile that we need to speak to, I think, pretty often in biotech. Someone who is really, really expert in their domain, who is like willing to dig in, right? Like they want to exercise their art. Like they want to build on your platform, and you've just got to put it in front of them in a way that doesn't take them years in order to learn how to use it.
Were they able to do it?
Yeah. It's beautiful. Like this was one of the projects that gave me conviction.
Yeah.
That there are a lot of products like this there's a little bit of art involved. Like this was a fine, not a commodity. This was a fine food product, required a deep expertise on the part of a customer to translate that technology into something that people wanted. And in this case, like it's a subtle flavor is what people wanted.
What would you say to somebody right now who is starting to think about this, has like you said, has deep expertise in a particular domain, needs to start thinking about how to engineer enzymes or whatever else? What advice would you give them?
That's a good question. I think I might start with something that's a little hands-on. I think I might start with something that's a little hands-on. I would suggest that somebody find their local biomaker space, or get in touch with BioBuilder and buy a kit where you could transform bacteria with GFP. Get a little bit of a tangible exposure to the way that process works, because I think that sort of, you just can't replicate that kind of, like there's really nothing like handling biological materials with your own two hands, and that's something that is true probably like it doesn't matter if you're working in industrial biotech, if you're working in food, if you're working in medicine, if you're working in agriculture, that part of it is the same. It also makes you feel more like an expert, you know, having done it with your own hands. There's a kind of confidence that is built, and once you've done that, like, you know, getting a summary of a scientific research article is not as intimidating anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where do you think are some of the most talented biotech folks sitting right now? Are they I'm guessing they're not in academia. Are they at some of these frontier labs? Are they at virtual cell model companies? Are they working on some esoteric startup? Where have you seen some of the most talent dense places?
I mean, I love the sort of like frontier nonprofit type labs in the Bay Area. Like I love ARC. I love Future House. I would love to see more action like that coming to Boston. I think that we have the talent for it. I think that maybe we're not quite as good at having fun, but I'm here. You know. So, you know, if somebody wants to make something like that happen, call me. But I think that's this translational space where you're not quite academia, but you're engaging with frontier models and with emerging technologies, and you have a mission, and your mission is not to publish papers, but to like ship usable tech. That's where you want to be right now. That's where you want to be in biotech. Like anything that takes a biologist and puts them in a place where it's where they have to ship something. Like it seems obvious, and it is like it's obvious in literally any other field except for biology. But taking an academic biologist and saying you should ship tech that people want to use is very novel, and you can make a lot of progress, I think, by doing that.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I have a few last questions for you. What is something else outside of things we've discussed today that particularly excites you, that you spent some time thinking about, that we might not have talked about today?
I'm really curious about consumer-facing biotechnologies, particularly in the healthcare space, because this is another point where we are breaking away from the historical model of biopharma, which is to put a really, really long gap between the people who are creating the technologies and the customers who are actually using them. And this the watershed moment was GLP-1s, and the fact that this is people will pay out of pocket for them. You have examples of companies like Hims that are bringing sort of pharmaceutical treatments in this really B2C way. There's a lot of like wellness diagnostics companies out there, same thing. Like they're taking this piece of biotechnology that was historically reserved just for experts, and they're packaging it and they're selling it B2C. And that's a really big deal. Like to me, it's a really big deal because it changes all of the incentives in biotech, and it creates a product development loop that has never really existed before, in the sense that we are going to quickly, because these companies exist, we are going to quickly discover how people actually want to get their diagnostic information about their body, and how they want to buy their medications, and which medications they're willing to just pay out of pocket for. And the answers to those are going to be totally different from everything that biology has ever offered them previously. And so we're going to see now, like, there are companies that are going to arise in response to those incentives. Right. And so, like, for example, like if you're in an early stage biotech, you're like, wow, people really fucking want hair loss treatments. That's weird. There was literally nobody was working on it. Like nobody was like 10 years ago, you couldn't find a single academic lab in all of North America.
Yeah.
that was working in hair loss treatments. There's a huge market for it, and people are going to respond to that incentive. And so you're going to see sort of like market pull on the kinds of technologies that scientists work on, because they can see the signal now that these B2C companies exist.
That's a really great point. And then the kind of value probably accrues to whoever builds the best distribution, which is incredibly hard. I'm currently debating whether or not to spend $200 on a superpower blood test. Is it superhuman or superpower? I keep getting their name confused, but it's a blood test at the end of the day. And I'm like skeptical about the kind of insights it will actually offer me. But the trend you're describing is something that is very secular in terms of people losing faith in, whether it be political, whether it be healthcare, whether it be governance, whatever it is, and kind of trusting each other, themselves, influencers, and these direct-to-consumer brands that offer ostensibly some sort of personalized insight, and in the future maybe even precision medicine, which is where something like synthetic biology can be supremely important. Yeah, I'm really excited about those. There's this one crypto-related company called HairDAO, which I think you should check out. They're really cool. They kind of crowdfunded a lot of their money and are funding all sorts of weird experiments in how to develop novel hair treatment drugs. And they're selling them now. It's like Hims almost, but it's very much crowdfunded. And
yeah. I love HairDAO. Exactly, like great example.
Oh right, you know
Hair.
her.
They got a product. They got a product to market,
Yeah.
and they did it pretty fast.
Yeah, it's not just like an idea. It's awesome.
Yeah. I'm bald, but I don't know. I'm comfortable being bald. I don't mind. But a lot of people want. It's something a lot of people want.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to start using those very soon, if not now. But this was awesome. Before we drop off, what are some books, ideas, essays that have really shaped the way you look at the world that you would recommend to everyone?
So the famous essay at the birth of synthetic biologist was by a guy named Yuri Lazebnik, and it's called "Can a Biologist Fix a Radio?" Can a biologist fix a radio? And this is a famous essay. I think it's really interesting to revisit now in the AI era. The thesis of this essay was, well, so maybe a cell, maybe we can think of a cell like a radio. Right? You can take a cell, you can break it down into components, characterize each of those components in accurately and in detail, understand how they fit together, characterize those interactions accurately and in detail. And then like you can build a radio from transistors and other components. Maybe you can build a model of the cell. You can have a deterministic model of the cell. And this was the insight that drove the beginning of synthetic biology, is this idea of building things out of parts.
Yeah.
It's funny now to look at it again in the AI era, because the counterexample, or the sort of like the old-fashioned way that he meant the biology way, as different from the engineering way that he talks about, is high throughput screening. This idea of, let's go in and make 1 million perturbations, and we'll just characterize each of those perturbations, right? And he says, okay, well, I mean, can you imagine if they did that to a radio, right? Like, I'm going to shoot a radio with a gun, and then I'm going to figure out and I'm going to break something, right? And then I'm going to diagnose what's wrong, and like that's how I figure out what's going on with the radio. But this kind of like this like high throughput random perturbation, turns out that actually that's actually kind of a good idea too, right? Like that's what builds an AI data set. And so there's this really interesting sort of synthesis going on, where you had this like parts focused bottom up approach proposed early in synthetic biology by Yuri Lazebnik, and now you have this sort of opposite approach of like broad-based, generate a large, don't try to be reductionist, try to build a model that accounts for everything all of the time. And it turns out that can work too, right? And so like the future is some kind of a synthesis now between building cells and building radios.
That's a really good way to put it. One of the things that I've heard founders talk about is being bitter lesson pilled when it comes to biology, where we are trying to build these virtual cell models that are legible to humans, when in reality we should be building models that are purely legible to AIs that can do all sorts of things once we throw in just scale up compute with better data, and they'll start spitting out things that we can't even predict or think about right now.
So this is more or less how I see things. And the funny thing is, like, as a biologist, that doesn't scare me at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't, right? Because like I work with things that I don't understand all the time, right? And
Yeah.
Their cells, right? And so the idea that, right, computer scientists when AI came along, they're like, oh my, what? It's not deterministic, right? Like it's not engineering at all.
Yeah.
Right? Does it even count? Does an AI model even count as computer code? Because it doesn't behave in a deterministic way. But biologists are like, yeah. That's how it is. Of course, that's how it is.
Yeah, that's how neural nets work.
You get what you get. And like biology, it more or less works.
This is true. I mean, this is how neural nets came to be. I mean, Jeffrey Hinton was a clinical psychologist or something like that before building neural nets, and now we have LLMs. Yeah. This is a great place to stop. This was awesome. Okay. Thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're super busy, so I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's great talking to you.
Great talking, Jake. I'll see you later.
Ciao.